Chapter 7, Lesson 1 can be found on page 202 in your textbook. Today we're going to learn about the physical geography of Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean islands. Our objectives for today's lesson is to understand that Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean islands, where they are located in the physical geography of these different countries and regions. Discuss the physical geography of each of these and compare and contrast them. Describe the climates in Mexico and Central America. Analyze a graph of the different climate zones and identify important resources in these locations. Let's jump into our reading for today. Again, on page 202. In front of you, you also will need your textbook, either in the online format. You're welcome to listen to the audio to read through this section, and also have your notes ready. Each of those note sections are as follows. In section 1, we're looking at the physical geography of Mexico and Central America, using your textbook to complete the concept web as you read the section. So it has the type of land features in Mexico and Central America. You're filling in those land features. The important bodies of water in Mexico and Central America, filling in those bodies of water as they're listed in your reading. Lastly, in this section, you're looking at the climate zones and the natural resources in this area as well. So as you read across those sections, we're going to identify and create the list of those based on the category that those items fall into. In the second section, we're going to use your textbook to answer the questions about the physical geography of the Caribbean islands. So we're kind of breaking this down into three parts because it's in the terms of Mexico, Central America, so a comparison between those two, and then the third, the Caribbean islands, in a separate yet similar study because they're in a similar region, but they're completely different because they are island areas. So we'll answer the questions listed below. Let's get started. Compare and contrast, we're looking at the difference between the physical features, the climate, the resources, and the population in these areas, Mexico and Central America. Technically, Mexico is a part of Central America and all of those countries, but Mexico is so much larger that we're going to use it as a separate comparison as we read. Here's a picture of the physical geography. The different colors connotate the different types of elevation in these areas. So you can see a darker color in terms of orange shows a higher elevation. A lower elevation is shown in green, closer to what would be the coastal areas. Yellow is kind of the in-between elevation. We begin on page 202. Mexico and the seven nations of Central America act like a bridge between two worlds. Geographically, they form an isthmus that connects North and South America. An isthmus is a narrow piece of land that connects two large landmasses. Culturally, they join the South America and some Caribbean islands to make up Latin America. Latin America is a region of the Americas where the Spanish and Portuguese languages, based on Latin language of ancient Rome, are spoken. Economically, the nations have close ties to the United States. They also trade with their Latin American neighbors. Shaped like a funnel, the region is wider in the north than in the south. To the north, Mexico has a 1,951-mile border with the United States. At the southern end, Central America, country of Panama, is only about 40 miles wide. Land features. Mexico is the largest nation of the region, occupying about two-thirds of the land. Imagine a backwards Y along the western and eastern coast of Mexico with the tail to the south. So here's where that Y shape, if you look at the shape of a Y, kind of looks like this, going down in this direction. A backwards Y along the western eastern coast of Mexico with the tail to the south. That backwards Y neatly traces the mountain system on Mexico's two coasts and southern central region. The coastal ranges are called the Sierra Madre Occidental, which is a Spanish word for western, and the Sierra Madre Oriental, which is a Spanish word for eastern. They join in the southern highlands. The coastal plains flank the western and eastern mountains, and the eastern plain is wider. Between the two forms of the Y is a vast highland region called the Central Plateau. It is the heartland of Mexico. This plateau is home to Mexico City, which is the capital and a large share of the nation's people. Mexico has two peninsulas. The Yucatan bulges northeast into the Gulf of Mexico. Baja California, Baja means lower in Spanish, extends to the south in western Mexico. So you've got the Sierra Madre Occidental, meaning to the west, Sierra Madre Oriental, meaning mountain range to the east. You've got the central plateau of flatland here, and then you've got what was described, the Yucatan Peninsula sticking into the Gulf of Mexico. And Baja California, this peninsula surrounded by water on three sides, that is the lower portion just south of California. Central America has landforms similar to those of South America, south central Mexico. Mountains run down the center of these countries. Narrow coastal lowlands flank them on the east and west. Mexico and Central America lie along the ring of fire that rims the Pacific Ocean. Earthquakes and volcanoes are common in the ring of fire. Sierra Madre Occidental are made of volcanic rocks, but they have no active volcanoes. The mountains in the southern part of the Central Plateau and in Central America, however, do have numerous active volcanoes. These volcanoes bring a benefit: volcanic material weather into fertile and productive soils. Earthquakes are common in the area too. A magnitude of 8.0 earthquake that hit Mexico City in 1985 killed thousands of people. One that struck El Salvador in 2001 produced another kind of disaster. A hill, weakened by the Earth's movement, collapsed onto the town of Las Colinas. It crushed homes and killed hundreds of people. So not only do we have the different distinctions of what are the physical geography in this region, we also have the unique distinction of having the ring of fire exist in this Pacific plate and give us these little red dots that show the volcanic activity in what is the southern portion of Mexico and all through Central America, because that's right on a fault line between those two different tectonic plates. If we look at our note section for today, we would fill in the different types of land features that are described in Mexico and Central America. We have mountains, we have highland areas, highland plateaus, there are volcanoes, there are peninsulas, the Yucatan Peninsula and Baja California, and you've got coastal plains and lowlands. If you look back at the map, you can see the distinctions between those. You've got mountains, plateaus, peninsulas, and then the different volcanoes are shown here with these triangles. In the next section, we're going to read about the important bodies of water. Bodies of water. Mexico and Central America are bordered by the Pacific Ocean to the west, over here. The Gulf of California, this inlet to the ocean, separates Baja California from the rest of Mexico. To the east, the region is surrounded by waters, the two arms of the Atlantic Ocean. They are the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea. So you've got the Atlantic Ocean out here. It's also the Atlantic Ocean, but it has the specific name of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean or Caribbean Sea. The region has few major rivers. In the northern half of Mexico, the climate is dry. This means that few rivers flow across the landscape. Southern Mexico and Central America receive more rain, but the landscape is steep and mountainous and the rivers are short. An important river is the Rio Bravo. In the United States, this river is called the Rio Grande. The largest lake in the region is called Lake Nicaragua in Nicaragua. So here's the Rio Grande that is the southern border of Texas and the northern border of Mexico. Lake Nicaragua is in the country of Nicaragua. An important waterway in the region is not a river, but a feature built by people. It is the Panama Canal, built in the early 1900s. The Panama Canal makes it possible for ships to pass between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans without journeying around South America. It saves thousands of miles to travel, which in turn saves time and money. It is one of the world's largest and most important waterways in terms of being man-made. Here's the Panama Canal. Why do you think they built the Panama Canal here, where there's only a 40-mile difference between one side of the country of Panama and 2,000-mile difference between the northern portion here? Probably because it's really, really small in terms of that distance to cut between those landmarks and those bodies of water, so that a ship can come from this side and get to the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic to the Pacific without having to go around all of South America. If we take a look at our notes, let's check back in. We have the two oceans, the Pacific and the Atlantic, but the Atlantic is going to be named in terms of the different ways in which it's divided closer to this region. So you've got the Gulf of Mexico, which is the Atlantic, and you have the Caribbean Sea. In terms of an area connecting the Caribbean Sea to the Pacific Ocean, you've got the Panama Canal. That was a man-made waterway commissioned by the United States to be built in Panama, and now has been turned over to give control to Panama. There's Lake Nicaragua, the largest lake in the area. There's the Rio Grande. And you have the Gulf of California. In the next section, it describes the different climates and natural resources from our reading. This map depicts those climate types. You can see here in the key, each of the different colors indicates the major type of climate in those regions. It's related to its proximity to the equator, and also the physical geography in terms of how high that elevation is. Obviously, here you've got the different mountainous and high plateau areas, highland areas. Here you've got a lot of lowland area that is closer to what would be these major oceans and the equator. Most of Mexico and Central America lie in the tropics. Because of their location near the equator, it might seem the climate would be hot. Although the coastal lowlands are hot areas when higher elevation are not, the highlands are much cooler. Nearly the entire region can be divided into three vertical climate zones: soil, crops, animals, climate change from zone to zone. The Tierra Caliente, or hot land, is the warmest zone. It reaches from sea level to about 2,500 feet above sea level. Major crops grown here are bananas, sugarcane, and rice. So here's a map of the different climate zones. Here's what that looks like in terms of elevation in the vertical sense. So the lowest area here is the Tierra Caliente. Caliente means hot. Next, you have the Tierra Templada. Next highest is the Tierra Templada, or temperate land. This climate zone has cooler temperatures. Here, farmers grow such crops as coffee, corn, and wheat. Most of the region's people live in this climate zone. The Tierra Caliente shows a temperature from 75 to 80, maybe even higher than that. Tierra Templada is 65 to 75 as an average temperature. As you go higher in elevation, the air is thinner, therefore it doesn't have the ability to hold that, maintain that heat capacity, so it gets cooler as you go higher as those particles are spread apart. Higher in elevation is the Tierra Fria. That's way up here, the cold land. This region has chilly nights. It can be used for dairy farming and grow hardy crops such as potatoes, barley, and wheat. Here your average temperatures are between 55 and 65. The higher in elevation you go, the continued decrease in that overall temperature. Geographers also designate other vertical climate zones. Few human activities take place in what is the Tierra Helada, or frozen land. The vertical climate zones is more common in other regions of the Americas. So you've got this designation, this distinction between however high you are, the higher in elevation you are, the colder it gets. Now back to those climate zones. Much of Mexico and Central America have a tropical wet dry climate. The climate is characterized by two distinct seasons. The wet season, during summer months, which is when most of the precipitation falls. The dry season occurs during the winter months. The dry season is longer in the areas farther from the equator and closer to the polar regions. The region's tropical location exposes it to another natural hazard. Ferocious hurricanes can strike in the summer and early autumn months. These storms do great damage. For example, a 1998 hurricane killed more than 9,000 people in Honduras and destroyed 150,000 homes. If we take a look at our notes, we need to make sure that we've got the different climate zones that are listed in here correctly. You've got the Tierra Caliente, which is hot land. You've got the Tierra Templada, which is temperate land. You've got the Tierra Fria, which is cold land. And the Tierra Helada, which is the frozen land, or the highest elevation in that region. A lot of these elevation or these climate zones are based on the different types of elevation that you can see. Now, in this map, it's showing those same climate zones and describing them in a different way in terms of tropical rainforest, tropical savanna, semi-arid, arid, humid subtropical in the different color distinctions here, but they're also related to the elevation in those areas. So you need to know kind of both of those aspects, that the elevation is what sets the climate in these regions, and these are the regions' climates that they experience, again, based on where they are according to the equator. Most of this region that we're studying falls into the tropics. It's relatively nice, really great weather, but there is also the reality of being close to the oceans in these areas for those major hurricanes and major weather events that can occur. The last section in this first description between Central America and Mexico is on the natural resources. Let's take a look. Oil and natural gas are Mexico's most important resources. They are found along the coast of Gulf of Mexico and in the Gulf waters. Mexico is an important oil-producing country. It has enough oil and gas to meet its own needs and still export a large amount. The exports help fuel the nation's economy. However, Mexico's oil production has declined since 2004. Many oil fields are old and are starting to run out of oil. When Spanish explorers first came to Mexico, they were attracted to the area's gold and silver. Mexico still produces silver, which is mined in the central and northern central parts of the country. Gold also is still mined in Mexico. Other minerals include copper, iron ore, and bauxite. Bauxite is used to make aluminum. The 7 smaller nations of Central America have fewer mineral resources. Nicaragua is an exception with gold, silver, iron ore, lead, zinc, and copper. The nation is so poor, however, that it has not been able to take advantage of these deposits. Guatemala also has some oil and has mountains that have produced nickel. So you can see that Mexico, being the largest of the nations in this Central American region, has the greatest amount of resources, where some of these smaller nations don't have that same abundance of resources just based on their overall size and the overall physical geography. You've got this mountainous and highland region. Here you've got mostly lowland areas between what would be these different major bodies of water. Make sure that you've got those listed of resources filled out in your notes. If you need to, go back and reread that. Mr. Shane's not going to go through this for you. He's going to make you do this one on your own. List each and every one of those mining resources and the items that are prominent resources in these regions. In the next section, it asks us to take a look at the physical geography of the Caribbean islands and to make sure that we answer these questions appropriately. Let's take a look at number one. Number one says, what are the three groups of islands that make up the Caribbean islands? Take a look on page 207. Hundreds of islands dot the Caribbean Sea. The islands are home to more than 30 countries or territories belonging to other countries. Some are large, with millions of people living on them. Others are tiny and home to only thousands of people. Major islands. The Caribbean islands can be segmented into three different groups. Here's our answer to the question. The first group is the Greater Antilles. The four islands, the largest, the Caribbean islands, include Cuba, Jamaica, and Hispaniola and Puerto Rico. Cuba and Jamaica are independent countries. Hispaniola is a home of two countries, Haiti in the west and the Dominican Republic in the east. Puerto Rico is a Commonwealth of the United States. Although it is the possession of the United States, it has its own government. The people of Puerto Rico are American citizens. They can travel freely between their island and the United States. Back to our PowerPoint here to show the distinction between these items is a reference to the different types of islands in this region. We've got the Greater Antilles and the Lesser Antilles. The Caribbean islands are made up of the Greater Antilles, the Lesser Antilles, and the third distinction for our notes is the Bahamas, which is a little bit further north of the Greater Antilles and south of what would be Florida. To make sure that we've got those filled in correctly, we would say the Caribbean islands are made up of the Greater Antilles, the Lesser Antilles, and the Bahamas. Again, from that map, you can see here's what are the Greater Antilles, the larger countries. Cuba, this is the island of Hispaniola, that is Haiti and Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. The United States has free reign to travel here. You don't need a passport to say that you're going to a different country, because Puerto Rico is technically part of the United States, even though it has its own government. And then you have the Lesser Antilles, which are these a lot smaller islands in this region. The second group of islands is the Lesser Antilles. Dozens of smaller islands make up this group. The former are an arc moving east from south from Puerto Rico to the northern South America. Most of the islands are now independent countries. At one time, they were colonies of France, Britain, Spain, and the Netherlands. Each has a culture reflecting its colonial period. The third island group is the independent nation of the Bahamas. The islands lie north of the Greater Antilles, east of Florida. The Bahamas include more than 3,000 islands, although people live on only about 30 of them. The Greater Antilles are a mountain chain of which is underwater. On a map, you can see this chain extends eastward from Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. These islands include some mountains such as the Sierra Maestra in the eastern part of Cuba and the Blue Mountains of Jamaica. The highest point in the Caribbean is Duarte Park in the Dominican Republic. The Lesser Antilles are formulated by volcanic mountains. Many of the volcanoes are extinct or no longer able to erupt. Some islands have dormant volcanoes or ones that can still erupt but show no signs of activity. So you have the two distinctions between the Greater Antilles and Lesser Antilles and the Bahamas that are right up in this region that have many, many, many small islands in that area. Take a look at our next question. What is the climate of the Caribbean islands? The Caribbean Sea is a western arm of the Atlantic Ocean. In the past, sailing ships traveled west from Europe, followed trade winds blowing from east to west to reach the sea. Christopher Columbus used the winds to reach the Bahamas in 1492. There he first sighted land in the Americas. Columbus explored the Caribbean too. These voyages sparked European settlement of the Americas. The warm waters of the Caribbean help feed the Gulf Stream. This current carries warm water up the eastern coast of the United States and across the Atlantic Ocean. The climate of the Caribbean. Here's where we answer number two. The The Caribbean islands have a tropical wet dry climate. Temperatures are high year-round, though ocean breezes make life comfortable. Humidity is generally high, but rainfall is seasonal and varies significantly. Islands like Bonaire receive only about 10 inches of rain per year. Dominica, on the other hand, receives about 350 inches of rain each year. This is an average of almost an inch of rain every single day. Like Central America and Mexico, the Caribbean islands are prone to hurricanes. These storms are most likely to occur in the northern areas toward the Gulf of Mexico than to the south. On average, 7 hurricanes strike the Caribbean islands each year. What's the climate of the Caribbean? We've got a tropical, wet, dry climate. What natural disasters affect the Caribbean islands? You have the potential for volcanic eruptions based on those volcanoes that could be dormant or active. A lot of times the active one is what is going to be cause of the eruption. You have the potential for earthquakes because of those fault lines, and hurricanes based on the weather patterns happening in the different parts of the Caribbean, mostly to the north. Number 4 says, what important natural resources can be found in these Caribbean islands? Reading the natural resources section on page 209. The waters of the Caribbean are rich in fish. Some are fished for food and others for sport. The islands have fewer timber resources today. People have cut down most of the trees already to use for fuel or to make farmland. Mineral resources are generally lacking too. Although some Caribbean islands have important resources, Trinidad and Tobago has reserves of oil and natural gas. The Dominican Republic exports nickel, gold, and silver. Cuba is a major producer of nickel. Jamaica has large amounts of bauxite. Perhaps the most important resource of the Caribbean is its climate and people. Warm temperatures and gracious hosts attract millions of tourists to the region each year. Some enjoy the white sandy beaches and clear blue water. Some scuba dive to see the colorful fish and darting through the coral reefs. What important natural resources can be found in these Caribbean islands? Trinidad and Tobago have oil and natural gas. The Dominican Republic is known for its nickel, gold, and silver. Cuba has nickel, and Jamaica has bauxite, all that can be mined and used to turn into or refine for different types of metallic purposes. Number 5, what are the most important resources of the Caribbean island? The climate, because it brings tourists. The major amount of income or economic activity in this region comes from the climate, because people want to go on vacation where it's tropical, beautiful, sunny, and they've got these wonderful beaches, and the landscape is just a terrific place to visit and experience. So the Caribbean islands and the climate are what bring tourists to these wonderful tropical destinations. That should be all to wrap up for our reading today. Thanks for making sure that you have those notes completed. God's blessings.